um, of taking good pictures, of how to use your camera, how to frame your shot, about certain photography rules, and then finally cover basically the elements and principles of art, which are going to be hugely important for final projects, semester exams, and kind of just your technique while taking pictures. So we're going to start with the big three. These are the things that cameras are made of, and they actually can be adjusted. So you can adjust the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO of your camera for different effects. So in this way, this is kind of the technical aspect of cameras. Now, what photography is capturing light. And you want to capture the right amount of light into your camera to make the subject. So when a light shines on something, it actually reflects back. And what's happening is the camera is capturing that reflected light back. And these three things control how much light is actually going into your camera. And they work in different ways, but basically they all have the same function, and that is to allow more or less light into your camera. And we're going to kind of go over what changing each of these three things actually does. So the biggest one, in my opinion, is the aperture. The aperture of a camera is kind of like a circle, and it goes from low numbers, which like a low number, for example, would be 1.8, to high numbers, which would be like 22. And as the number gets bigger, the actual hole, all right, this right here, gets smaller. So it's a little bit confusing, but this kind of will help you understand it a little bit more. So what aperture controls is the background blur for an image. So how much of the background is blurred when you get close up to your subject. Now this is really important in photography because it can help isolate a subject. It can help frame a subject. It can help you focus on a subject. So let's start with a low aperture. Okay, so 1.8. For example. Now at 1.8, what's happening is that circle that allows light in, all right, is really, really wide open. All right, it allows a lot of light in. All right. So when we look at 1.8, we can tell, all right, back here that this background is very, very blurry. We can't even tell what it is, basically. You'll also notice that our subject's shoulder and ear, all right, and as part of his hat begins to get blurry as well. All right. So if you really want an exaggerated blur effect, you want a lot of background blur, kind of really a dynamic image that focuses your subject, you're going to want to use 1.8. We can see that as we go up, okay, 2, 2.8, all right, the background blur, all right, becomes less and less. All right, over here we can't really tell that this is snow. Now we're going to start making out, okay, this white stuff on the ground could be snow. All right, and again, as we go higher and higher, okay, F4, for example, all right, it gets less and less blurry, all right, and the subject becomes less and less blurry. Now, this example only goes up to F8. If you kept going, all right, 11, 16, 22, the background has become more and more clear, all right. So that is basically what aperture does. All right, aperture is the size, all right, of the hole that your camera allows light to go in. Low numbers, again, mean it's wide open. When somebody says it has a low aperture, that means it's wide. That hole is really wide and it allows a lot of light in. And because it allows so much light in, all right, it makes the background of the picture blurry if you're close up to the subject. All right, the higher number you go, the smaller the hole becomes, and that smaller the hole becomes makes the entire picture, background included, more and more clear. The second thing working in your image is shutter speed. Now, shutter speed, unlike aperture, acts kind of like a door or a shutter to the window or something kind of like that in your camera. It's very small. But basically what happens when you press that button, this shutter is going to go up and then it's going to go down. Okay, and you decide how long it goes up for and how long, and consequently how long it will go down. So say I set my camera to 1 second and I press that button, well, my shutter is going to go up, it's going to stay open for 1 second, and then it's going to close. Okay. Now what that does, all right, is it allows light to go in for a certain amount of time. So let's say this is a good example right here. On the left, we have 1/20th of a second. All right, so a lot of times they're written they're written in a fraction, 1/120. So 1/20th of a second, and you'll see that it captures, all right, this moving Ferris wheel. All right, it captures kind of every streak of light. Now, on the right here, we have a shutter open for 4 seconds. All right, so if you think in your head, that's when you press the button and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, that shutter, all right, a light is going in for a very long period of time. And so what happens is we have these really kind of cool light streaks, all right, that go around. Now, shutter and aperture, they work together. You can't just control one and ignore you can't just control aperture and ignore shutter speed, or just set shutter speed and ignore aperture. They kind of work in tandem with each other. They're kind of like partners in crime. So whenever you're adjusting aperture, you got to think about your shutter speed, and whenever you're adjusting your shutter speed, you got to think about your aperture and make sure it's the picture that you want to take. The final one might seem a little bit confusing. It's called ISO. What ISO is, it's the film speed of your camera. So while aperture is the hole, or the amount of light that's let in, and shutter speed is how long that light is let in for, ISO is how quickly your camera captures that light. All right. So in the olden film days, I guess it's not old because we're doing it in this class, but when it comes to film, how quickly does that film, those little silver particles on the film, react to that light? All right. Now, they come in certain set numbers. All right. 100, 200, 400, 800, up to 1600 are pretty normal ISO numbers for film. But when you get into digital, you got to be careful, because the faster, all right, the ISO, or the film, or the sensor, when a digital camera absorbs light, the more distorted the image can become. So if you get up into these higher numbers, okay, 3200, 6400, all right, your image becomes progressively darker, or progressively more grainy or digitalized. Here's another example. So this same picture taken at 100 ISO versus an ISO of 3200, all right, you can see that there's a bunch of noise here. That's got a bunch of distortion. So you might think to yourself, well, why would I ever use a higher film speed, all right, a more sensitive film speed? Which is a good question. Basically, when we're talking about ISO, the reason we would use ISO 100 is because it's slow to capture light. We know we're going to be out in a sunny area, all right, and light is not going to be a problem. We're not going to be taking pictures in a dark area. However, when we're taking pictures in a dark area, it's essential to have a higher ISO, all right, number, especially for digital cameras, to be able to capture light quickly. And again, these three things work in tandem. So, say I'm in a dark theater trying to take a picture of a play. All right. Well, the lowest aperture I can go to is 1.8. All right. So I open my camera up as wide as possible. All right. But I need to capture people moving in this play. Well, my shutter speed, I know that if I go to like 1 or 2 seconds, these people are going to be moving in that 1 or 2 seconds, and they're going to be blurry. That's where ISO comes in. ISO helps you have a faster shutter speed, all right, in a darker area. Now, what you do is you sacrifice, okay, this kind of grainy digital effect when you do that, but at least you have the option of capturing that picture. Again, we're going to aim for taking really nice, clean shots, all right, without these digital artifacts and grain, but we can work on that a little bit later. Just know these three things: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Your packets and other homework are going to help you reinforce these, but they all work together, and you need to know how to control each and every one of them to take kind of unique pictures. All right. The next kind of technique, the next kind of technical thing that we need to know is how to frame your picture in an intriguing and exciting way. A lot of you guys will begin by taking pictures, kind of wide pictures like of the quad or just random stuff, but you're letting things come into your picture that you don't really want in your picture. to help you kind of with this is a technique developed by photographers that helps you make your subject more interesting. So at prom or homecoming or wherever you're going to go, your mom is going to get a camera out and she's going to take a picture of you and she's going to put you dead center of that picture. All right. Normally, how we take pictures is we put people dead center in the middle of the picture, and because of that, it's very kind of boring. All right. There's nothing really exciting going on. The rule of thirds, all right, is a technique, a photographic technique that can help you make your subjects and the things you're taking pictures of a lot more interesting. So let's look at this example. It's a little bit blurry, but it's a good example. Now, basically what the rule of thirds states is that you should kind of draw this grid on your in your mind, okay, when you're taking a picture. You should line up your subject on either this line or this line, one of the vertical lines. Specifically, if you can manage it, you should try to hit one of these 4 points, okay, right here. Now, this photographer does an excellent job of achieving this. He actually hits all 4 points, all right, with different rocks and different structures. All right. So lining your subject up on one of these 2 lines, okay, these 2 vertical lines, and trying to put the most important part of that subject on one of these focal points, these 4 main sweet spot points, will just automatically make you a better photographer. Okay. Now, the second part of the rule of thirds involves these 2 horizontal lines. All right, and basically what the rule of thirds says is try to put your foreground, okay, you're the front part of your image in this bottom, okay, this bottom of these horizontal section of these horizontal lines, your middle ground in this middle section, and your background on this top section. All right, and that can help make your picture more dynamic as well. All right, so again, this photographer does a great job of putting the foreground, the things closest to him, in this bottom section, the middle ground, the things kind of in the middle of the picture, in this middle ground, and the background, the things like this mountain range in this top part of the section. So again, the rule of thirds deals with both the vertical and the horizontal lines. All right. If we go to this picture right here, you'll notice, all right, that our subject, okay, is lined up not exactly. This picture probably would be a little bit better if this lighthouse was exactly on these lines. But the most interesting part, this kind of balcony thing right here that kind of draws our attention, this little triangle shape, lines up right here on that sweet spot. Okay, he does a pretty good job of putting most of the stuff near to him in this bottom portion, the middle portion, okay, right here, and the background up on top. All right, so again, he lines up his subject. He doesn't put it straight in the middle of the photo, right? But he lines it up on this right rule of thirds lines. Again, another very good example of the rule of thirds. Okay, we have this bottle lined up square on, all right, this line right here. The most interesting part, this kind of neck of the bottle, it hits that sweet spot. Okay, the note right here hits another sweet spot. All right, so we have a nice subject. And again, if we look at the horizontal rule of thirds, yes, we have the foreground right here, we have the middle ground right here, and these mountains in the background take up the top part of the image, okay, which makes it a very nice, we like looking at images like this. They look professionally done. All right, this one's without the lines, okay, so let's take a little step back. All right, we'll notice if we draw that vertical line, it's going to hit right here, all right where that window is, our sweet spot, all right. And if we draw those horizontal lines, okay, foreground, middle ground, and the background in the back. Okay, we'll take a few more, look at a couple more ones. Now this one's kind of intriguing. All right, it has a very distinct, okay, foreground, middle ground, background. All right, and if we, okay, track our point, all right, I bet a lot of people started looking at this picture going like this, following it around, okay? Following kind of those 4 points around. All right? Again, a very good use of the rule of thirds. Our surfer is lined up right on that line right here, okay? His head hits one of those sweet spots, all right? A good use of foreground, middle ground, and kind of a blurry background, okay, up here on the top, all right? It would be a lot, the picture wouldn't be as good if this surfer was placed right in the middle of this picture. This kind of gives it a dynamic feel, like he's moving through the picture. All right. Finally, okay, we look at this image again. All right, our pole hits right here on that line. Bikes, all right, one of these sweet spots. Okay, top of this light structure, one of these sweet spots. We have another subject, okay, that follows this other vertical line. Foreground, middle ground, background. Okay, so these are all great examples of the rule of thirds. All right, and if you can apply the rule of thirds to your photographs, you'll be on the first step to becoming a really good photographer. All right, the next thing we're going to go over are the elements and principles of art. These are art techniques that can help you express emotion, make your pictures more intriguing, and if you combine this with the rule of thirds and framing your shot and using correct aperture and shutter speed, you'll be really on track to making photography a true art form. Now, the core kind of principles of photography can be established through the elements of art. And you're going to notice when you start looking at pictures from now on, you're going to start noticing these things. These things are going to pop up all over the place. So the first thing we're going to talk about are how these things show up in photography and how you can use them to make images more intriguing. So the elements of art, there are 7 of them. Line, shape, form, space, value, color, and texture. And we're going to look at these now. Okay, so let's talk about line. Now, line in photography is probably the most important element in photography because it guides you to the subject. Okay, now when we start looking at these images, I want you to start being aware of where your eye goes first and how your eye is looking at this picture, where your eye is stopping, where your eye is going. And just be aware of how you're viewing this picture. So for me, I start over here somewhere, and I'm immediately sucked in to the girl. I keep going back, and my eye, okay, wants to keep focusing right in here, okay, right on this girl, and everything seems to be taking me to this girl. And when I look at her face, I feel comfortable in this image. When I look over here in this image, it takes me down here. And this is a great use of lines. This moves us to our subject, this girl's face, this girl, right? And it moves, all the lines work to move us back towards her. Okay, even these lines on the right hand side move us back towards her. So the photographer is saying, hey, look here, this is where I want you to look. I'm using lines to express that I want you to look here. All right, now lines used a little bit differently in this picture. Okay, this is a great example of curved lines. Where above that the picture of the girl was a good example of leading lines, this one also leads us through the picture. Okay, I bet 90% of you started right down here and you followed this river through here, okay, back into here, up through the mountains, all right, and then said, wow, that was nice, and then went back through the river, through here, back through the mountains, and our eye just kind of traces us, right? It brings us along, kind of flows us through the picture, up into the mountains, up into kind of this beautiful little landscape. So this line, this curved line, helps us lead us through the picture. Okay? I bet a lot of you guys started down here and you're bouncing back and forth right here, ding, 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 and then this line takes you back up where you bounce back and forth again, all right? And your eye just keeps going back and forth and back and forth, all right, tracing kind of these lines. Again, all of these examples are examples of leading lines. They guide us through the picture. They say, hey, look at this subject, but look at it in a specific way. Okay? Now, a lot of you probably started with the subject, okay, right here. But if your eye started to wander off, okay, we have kind of this strange line pattern, all right, that kind of disorients us. But we also have the line of the shadow that leads us back to our subject. So if we get lost trying to look at here, trying to figure out how to look at this shadow kind of brings us back. And so we kind of do this circular motion with this photo. Again, using lines to tell us about our subject. Now, I put this one in here because it's a bad example of line use. Okay. Now, if we dissect, we look at all the lines in this picture. We have lines up here, we have lines over here, we have lines right here and here, right here, okay, all over the place, all right? My eye immediately goes to the center, all right, which tells me that they're not following the rule of thirds, okay? And when I try to trace around this line, it gets lost, it gets confused. So now I have these lines competing against these lines and this kind of maze of lines right here, and it's just a messy, confused photograph. I don't really like looking at it. It doesn't make me happy, all right? It's too many lines and not a single message, okay? This one, however, this one's great, okay? I know exactly what I need to look at, this cloud right here, right? Because all of my lines lead me to that cloud, okay? Everything leads me to the center of this image, okay? I'm not even mad that it's not following the rule of thirds because it's purposeful. It's saying, hey, look, right here in the center, and everything's kind of pulling to the middle of this picture. Okay, so those are lines. Now lines are essential and you have to start using lines. You have to start thinking about lines. And if a line is in your picture taking away from your subject, that's a big red flag. Right? Make sure lines in your picture are leading to your subject. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about is shape. All right, and shape's pretty simple. It is basically shapes, squares, rectangles, triangles, circles that show up in your picture. They don't have to be perfect shapes, so right here you can see that this is not a perfect shape, all right, but it's a shape nonetheless. And people love shapes because we know what they are. Oh, that's a square. Oh, that's a rectangle. Oh, cool. I get behind that. Oh, I see that he's trying to talk about shapes here in this picture, and this weird shape that this building makes right here, and these shapes on the wall. And people really feel comfortable with shapes. Okay, we like images. If you open up a magazine, you'll see tons and tons and tons of shapes because people immediately respond. They say, oh, circle. I love circles. Yay, bracelets. Those are cool. All right. So using shape is a good, easy way to make a good photograph. All right. Now, shapes don't actually have to be fully fleshed out squares. Okay. If we look at this subject right here, we notice that she's making a triangle. All right. Her body, her pose is making a triangle. We have the sun in the background. And this very firm triangle shape lined up on the rule of thirds, we're comfortable with that position. We're like, cool, that's a triangle kind of shape. I'm happy with that. All right. This one, a little bit confusing, but still a giant square right in the middle of our picture. All right. Leading lines to our random guy right here. And even though this photo is a little bit abstract, all right, I still feel comfortable with it because I have this giant square to ground me. Oh, it's a giant square. That's nice. Okay, not sure what this random guy is doing in there, but that's okay. All right, the next one we're going to talk about is form. Now, a lot of you guys, when you're beginning out, you're going to call it depth, okay, how deep the photo goes. But start using the word form to express kind of depth to an image. So you guys see that this picture goes back and back and back and back and back, all right, to the Golden Gate Bridge. It's almost like you're being drawn into it. It's the 3D effect of an image. So we know that this picture is flat, but it has an effect like it goes on and on and on and on. Okay. If we look more at form here, all right, you'll notice the branches, but okay, and even though there's a blur effect, okay, that helps us focus on the branches, we know that this is a deep forest, and there's a lot of form to this image where it kind of draws you. You know that there's a lot of depth here. All right, same thing here. Okay, the way this image is taken. All right, this might even be a video game. I'm not even sure. But there's depth to it, okay? It goes back into the picture. It's that 3D effect, all right? This one right here, again, is a painting, but another good example of form, all right? So we see that this flat surface gives us the illusion that it goes back into the wall, and that, in essence, is form, all right? The most confusing one of all of these is space, okay? And if you can figure out space, it'll make you a great photographer. So we'll look right here, okay? Now, what space is it is basically the part of a picture that is left purposely empty, all right? So in this instance, all this area right here, okay, totally empty, that helps you to give meaning to the photograph, all right? Or isolate a subject. So this one right here. Okay, this space tells us, this big, giant, empty space tells us that this dude right here is super high up. All right. It also tells us that if he lets go of that rope, he's gonna die because he's gonna fall thousands of feet to his death. Now, this space has no actual image in it. All right, it's empty. There's nothing in it, but it tells us the meaning of the image. Okay. A kind of different technique with space. Okay. Again, you'll see there's nothing in here. Okay. There's nothing for us to look at in any part of this picture except for right here in this little small part. All right. But it tells us, hey, don't look here in this corner. There's nothing to look at. Pay attention, all right, to these light poles, okay? And these light poles are kind of emphasized by this giant empty space. Okay. Similarly, this one's a little bit different. In this image, there's a lot of different things filling up the image. These people, these pillars, okay, these light stuffs right here. But it is the space where things aren't, okay, where there isn't a giant altar and pillars and people. It's this kind of where things aren't, right in the middle, that tells us about this picture, in that this building is super, super tall and super, super grand, and super, super gigantic, but the empty space tells us about that. Okay? Again, all right, we know that our subject's right here. It follows the rule of thirds. It hits on one of those sweet points, but it's really this empty space back here and all around here that tells us that this house is in the middle of nowhere. All right? The empty space is really the key thing here, and it says, hey, look at this house in this beautiful area. And that's what the empty space tells us. Okay. The next one we're going to talk about is value. Now, value is the difference between black and white. And the images that I chose here are not super great value. They're more contrast, and that's kind of my fault. But it is the difference between the whitest white on your picture and the blackest black. All right. So this would be a great example of contrast, which is a principle of art, because we have basically, I don't know, one or maybe two shades of white and maybe one or two shades of black. Okay, but what we're looking for in value, all right, again, great example of contrast, not a great example of value, all right, where we have one or two tones of white and a lot of black. Okay, good contrast, bad value. Let's go to this one. This one has a good value. Okay, what we're looking for is multiple shades of white and multiple shades of black. Okay, now what you could say is there's a lot of gray, but it's the use. So we have the blackest of blacks, the whitest of whites, okay, and all the different shades of gray in between. That constitutes value. So this is a good example of value. All right. Again, this one's getting closer to value, but it hasn't mastered it yet. We have black blacks, white whites, okay, and a lot of different grays in between. But again, this would be a better example of value than this image. The next one we're going to talk about is color. Okay. Now, color may seem obvious, but it can also be the subject of a picture. It can also highlight something in the picture. For example, the subject of this picture is blue. All right, it's how the blues interact and how they're vibrant. The color actually is the subject in this picture. It's not the couch, it's not the wall, it's not the chair. It's the color blue and how the color blue is so beautiful and pretty. That's the subject of this picture. In this picture, color is used to kind of emphasize the beauty of this kind of night. All right, and this looks like a shot glass. So we're gonna move on this one. All right. In this one, again, okay, the colors speak for themselves. The reds, the greens, the blues, the oranges, all right? All of it kind of works together to tell us, hey, it's autumn, all right? It's fall time. Isn't it pretty? Okay? So the subject can be color in itself. Now, color can also be used to focus us in on a subject and give us feeling and emotion. So example, the blues, okay, of this. Now we know that this sun, totally white, this probably has a yellowish hue, but the photographer used these blues to show us about the ocean, to show us about the coolness of the ocean and how awesome this guy is for kind of surfing this giant, awesome, beautiful bluish, wave-ish type thing. Color can also help us to highlight a subject, okay? So the subject in this one is this yellow piece of clothing, this yellow bathing suit. And what this yellow color does is it tells us about summer, and the ice cream is there to reinforce it. To tell us about summer and being by the pool and hanging out and having a good time. And if you have this bathing suit, you can have a good time too. And that yellow color kind of tells us everything that we need to know about the subject. The final element and principle of art is texture. Whoops, that was weird. Oh, and we're going back to line. Okay, hold on. Is texture. And texture is the feeling you get when you see a picture and your kind of fingers tingle. It's like, what would it be like to actually touch that photograph? So if we look here, all right, we notice that this is full of texture. Like we can almost feel our fingers running through whatever this is, some sort of branches, I don't know. And we can kind of feel what that might feel like. Or this grass right here, right? We can see the sharpness of it, right? These little petals of water, and we can kind of almost feel the grass on our fingers, okay? Similarly, with this wall, it's almost like we can run our fingers against it, and we can kind of feel what that feels like, and that's kind of texture, and it pops out, okay? Again, images like this, okay? You can almost run our hand over it, and we can kind of get a feeling of it, even though it's just an image of this thing. All right, so those are the elements and I don't know where I'm at right now. These are the elements and principles of art. Okay, line, shape, form, space, value, color, texture. And these are essential, and capturing some of these and focusing on some of these can help you be a great photographer. Now, the kind of advanced, oh my gosh. All right, let's boom, 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 boom. All right. Now, photography, we can also add the principles of art. Okay. Now, the principles of art are kind of like advanced techniques, and once we've mastered the elements and principles of art, we can start using them to even give more of a message through the principles of art. Okay. Now, there are 9. Okay. 8 or 9 principles of art, principles of design, sometimes they're called, that can really help you become a good photographer. If you focus on capturing pattern or capturing rhythm or using emphasis to define your subject, your photography can improve immensely. So we're going to go through these. Okay, pattern is the repetition of something. So it can be a lot of different things. Now, this is a good example of pattern. We have the same kind of color and shape repeating over and over and over again in our photograph. Same thing. All right, with these leaves, okay? So we have the same thing repeating over and over and over again. And we like pattern. Humans like pattern. We like looking at pattern. And we like kind of distinguishing the very small... What is that? Is that a little bug right there? Oh my goodness, look at that's a little bug. A little spider or something. Wow, amazing. Good photograph, Gary Helm. All right, we like looking at pattern, all right? It's great. So if we zoom back out here... All right. So again, pattern, and again, this should be on the back of your shooting list. I have these papers too if you need them. Okay. Contrast, again, we kind of went over it in the elements of art. It's the difference between black and white. Okay. And it's usually a hard difference. Okay, where we have a white and a black, or white and a black. All right, and contrast is used to kind of express those two tones. All right. Emphasis. Okay, emphasis is crucial to photography. Almost every picture that we have has a little bit of emphasis in it. We know where to look. We know what to focus on. We know what our subject is. Okay, emphasis kind of does this to the extreme. Okay, so if we look right here, all right, obviously we know what to look at. Okay, one of these things is not like the other. We know exactly where to look for this image. And it's a very interesting image, and it's simple, apples and a pepper, right? But it's a cool image that we like to look at, and it's kind of fun, right? But we know that this is our subject, and this is where we need to look, and he uses color to kind of emphasize that as well. All right, balance, okay? Balance in an image. I don't remember which one I did here, okay? No, obviously. All right, balance in an image is when you can draw a line down the center. All right, and it feels complete. Okay. Equal sides are balanced. Now this doesn't have to be two equal things like these two rocks, but we don't want to have like all of our subject over here, okay, and then nothing over here, which is actually it's a different technique. All right, so make sure if you're aiming for balance, like if you're taking a picture of a person's face close up, that they're balanced. We can kind of use symmetry. In contrast, this is what an unbalanced photo looks like. Okay, and it gives us different psychology. It kind of messes with our head. We don't necessarily like it that much, and it lends itself to a different kind of emotion, a different type of feel, where you feel safe and comfortable with this one. All right, I get it. Everything's balanced. This one kind of makes us uncomfortable, like things are falling apart. All right, scale. Okay, scale, also sometimes known as proportion, and I'll use those two words kind of interchangeably. Scale or proportion is when you take something big and you make it small, or you take something small and make it big. Okay, so in this one, we've taken a very small ant and we've made it big. All right, and it makes it interesting. All right, we can also take something very big and make it small. All right, I don't have an example of that. But that is scale and proportion. Harmony is when things work together, okay? Everything is working together to tell you one message, one clear message. So example, this is a good example of harmony. All right, we have multiple parts working here, okay? Multiple pattern designs, kind of competing with one another, but we understand that it's all working together to tell us about this zebra, all right? All right. Rhythm and movement is huge in photography. Okay, it's almost as important as line, and it's a very easy way to take a very good photograph right from the get-go. This is an example of rhythm. Now, you might confuse it for pattern at first. Okay, you'll see, don't we have the same kind of arch repeating over and over and over and over again? Yes, we do. The difference between rhythm, okay, and pattern is that we kind of have movement. It's getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. All right, so where this one's really big, all right, and this one's really tiny, we have kind of this rhythm, this movement of the pattern somewhere. Okay. Unity. Unity is taking a bunch of different things, all right, and it is making those things come together to be seen as a whole. So example, we'll take this one, all right. Sorry, this is another example of rhythm. Okay, we can see that these pillars getting smaller and smaller and smaller out to the distance. But it also is a good example of unity as well. But this is a better example of unity. We have this rock, these waves, okay, sunset, this lighthouse, this cloud, kind of all different things, but it all comes together to tell us about this specific location and this subject, this lighthouse, okay, this wave, okay, and they all come together. So this is a very good example of unity where everything in the image kind of fits together. Nothing's popping out, nothing's sticking out, making the image awkward. Okay. The last thing we're going to talk about is variety. So variety is a bunch of different stuff, okay, that comes together to create something visually interesting. All right. So this platter of sushi is a great example where we have a bunch of different stuff, okay, weird kind of colors and shapes and textures that all come together that kind of make one image where we don't say, oh, that's weird, or that sticks out, or that's indistinguishable, but they all kind of come together. So again, these are a little bit more difficult to master effectively than the elements of art, but they can help you make intriguing images when you start to use them. So this was basically a presentation of a couple key things. We first talked about the big three: the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO. We also talked about the rule of thirds and how you can use that to make your shots more dynamic. And then we went over the elements and principles of art. Okay, incorporating all these three things, okay, technical and artistic, into your photographs will help you really take better pictures in the future.